Hello, my name is Dennis Johnson, and I'm the author of The Missing Link, Astronomy, the Key to the Past. In the book, I describe my discovery of some amazing astronomical facts, one of which is the discovery of what I believe is the true Sothic cycle. This presentation will describe that discovery and explain how the Sothic cycle actually worked. The Egyptian goddess Sopdet was known to the Greeks as Sothis and represented the brightest star in the sky, the one that we call Sirius. Since the second ruler of the first dynasty of Egypt, whose name was Horus-Zur, an ivory tablet belonging to him has been understood to represent the association of the rising of Sothis as the beginning of the Egyptian year. For more than a century, the so-called heliacal rising of Sothis, meaning with the sun, has been understood to be an integral part of the Egyptian calendar system and has defined the Sothic cycle. The Egyptian season calendar was composed of 3 seasons: flood, called inundation, growth, and harvest. Each season consisted of 4 months of 30 days. And to that were added 5 epogomenal days for a total of 365 days in the Egyptian calendar. The star Sirius, that one that the Greeks called Sothis, has a period very close to 365 and a quarter days, exactly the same as the Julian calendar, due to its proximity to Earth. The Sothic cycle was imagined by Edward Meyer to consist of 1,461 years of 365 days and 1,460 years of 365 and a quarter days, both of which total 533,265 days. The Sothic cycle, as described by Egyptologist Edward Meyer and accepted by Egyptologist Richard Parker, became the basis of Egyptian chronology. This is because Meyer found 3 references to rain dates at which the rising of Sothis was noted. The first of Thoth, the first month of the year, that Meyer identified as corresponding to our July 19th, would be the day that Sothis rose for 4 years, and then it would advance to the second of Soth for 4 years, and so forth until Sothis migrated entirely around the calendar and once again rose on Thoth the first. This cycle was then thought to repeat, except that this scheme does not work with the actual astronomy. And that's for the same reason that the Julian calendar had to be reformed with the institution of the Gregorian calendar. Edward Meyer, who published Egyptische Chronologie in 1904, concluded that a citation from Censorinus referred to a new Sothic cycle in the year 139 of the Common Era. Meyer assumed apparently from the math, 365 times 1461 equals 365.25 times 1460, that 1460 years is the duration of a Sothic cycle, although he wrote that no reference to Sothic cycle exists in Egyptian writings. Meyer and others subtracted 1460 years from 139 of the Common Era and arrived at a range of dates of 1321 to 1318 for the beginning of the previous cycle. If this were true, then the previous cycle would have begun the year 2781 through 2777, before the Common Era. The rest of this video, I will be narrating and sharing my computer screen so that you can see what I'm describing. I want to next describe my discovery of the true Egyptian Sothic cycle, and it was connected with my Master of Arts thesis project at Arizona State University. And in my studies, I had concluded that the reign of Seti I, second pharaoh of Dynasty 19, began to reign in the year 1314 BCE. And based on the fact that his father, the founder of the dynasty, Ramses I, is known to have had a reign of 1 year and 4 months, concluded that the Dynasty 19 began in the year 1316 BCE, rather than the 1321 to 1318 BCE window as had been proposed by Meyer and others. There are actually 3 versions of consolidated chronology of Egypt, Babylon/Assyria, referred to as high, middle, and low chronologies of the ancient Near East. These are derived from a synthesis of Egyptian and Babylonian chronologies and governed by 3 possible years for recorded observations of Venus during the 8th year of the 10th ruler of Dynasty 1 of Babylon, the same one that included Hammurabi. Using the computer-based planetarium program, Sky Globe, I decided to investigate this situation. Sky Globe will display the sky from any location from 30,000 BCE to 30,000 CE. And take note, all planetariums, including planetarium programs, use the Julian calendar. From the perspective of Cairo, Egypt, I looked at every day of 1316 BCE to see if anything unusual had occurred involving the star Sirius. I discovered that on July 31st, 1316 BCE Julian, something extraordinary did occur involving the star Sirius. 90 minutes prior to the sunrise, Sothis Sirius rose simultaneously with the planet Venus. This is the calendar converter that I use in my work. It's published by Formilab in the Netherlands. It will operate on any platform. All you have to do is search for calendar converter and you'll find it. And what it does is it has all of the calendars that are commonly used included, and it allows you to search from any calendar date, and it will simultaneously display all of the corresponding dates for all of the other calendars. So what I'm going to do is change this date from this year to -1316 and change the month August to July and the day to 31. And then I'll execute a calculate from this calendar, and this produces 2 useful numbers for us. The first one is the Julian day number, a day that is used by astronomers to identify a particular day in the history of mankind and so forth. The Julian day number for July 31st, 1316 BCE Julian is 1,240,965. That's the Julian day number. The corresponding Gregorian calendar date for that date is July 19th, 1315 BCE. And everyone should notice the date July 19th. This is the exact day that Meyer and other Egyptologists had identified as the day that the Sothic cycle would have begun, and it was the ideal day for the flooding of the Nile. I then decided to look at the sky 1460 years prior to July 31, 1316 Julian, and I found nothing. I used 1460 because that was the number of years that Meyer had speculated was the duration of the Sothic cycle. I then looked at every day in the sky at night until I arrived at July 31, 2774 BCE. This is what I found on that date. Again, it's July 31, 2774 before the Common Era. Perspective from Cairo, time of day 3:16 a.m., 90 minutes prior to sunrise. And here again, looking to the east, on the horizon, we see that Sirius has risen just to the south of east at exactly the same time as Venus, just to the north of east. I then went back to the calendar creator, and what we will do here is we'll change the date from -1316 to 2774. And we don't have to change July 31st because it's the same in both years. And when we calculate this Julian date, it produces the Julian day number 708430 and the Gregorian calendar date July 8th, 2773. And I will comment here that July 8th, although not the idealized date of July 19th, still falls within the time period that the Nile could flood and did flood. This is a chart that I created for illustrating the calculations I made for the length of the actual Sothic cycle. So as we saw, Sky Globe shows simultaneous rising of Venus and Sirius on July 31st, 1316 BCE, and we saw this was Julian day number 1,240,965, and that day converts to July 19th, 1315 Gregorian. We also saw that Sky Globe shows simultaneous rising of Venus and Sirius on July 31st, also in 2774 BC. Julian day number 708430 and Gregorian date July 8th. Here are the calculations. Taking the Julian day number for 1316, 1,240,965, and subtracting the Julian day number from the 2774 date, we come up with 532,535 days in the Sothic cycle. This is a precise, accurate number. And in astronomy, when you have a repetition of this sort, it is a cycle that is not just limited to one repetition. And here's the demonstration. So we take the 532,535 days divided by the number of days in the Egyptian calendar, 365, and it produces exactly 1,459 Egyptian years. Taking the same number of days and dividing by the precise average Sirius year in days, it equals exactly 1,458 Sirius years. So this is unlike Edward Myers. He had 1,461 Egyptian years and 1,460 Sirius years. This is 1,459 and 1,458, and then we work Venus into it, the same number of days, 532,535, and although the nominal average Venus cycle is 584 days, astronomers know that in the long term the average is 583.92, so if we divide by 583.92, we come out to exactly 912 average Venus cycles. So as I said, in astronomy, if you have a cycle that is identified, it can be shown to repeat other times than that. So here is a chart I constructed for this purpose. Here is July 31st, 1316. Here is July 31st, 2774. This would have been the demarcation between dynasties 18 and 19. and this would have been the previous cycle. The cycle that would have been in force during the entire 18th dynasty, when the references to the appearance of Sothis are recorded. The previous to that cycle, calculated by subtracting the correct number of days, was July 30th, 4237. And this is the first possible coincidence of this astronomical event with the rising of the Nile. And this would have been the beginning of the Sothic cycle that was in progress when the first dynasty of Egypt, the second pharaoh, the notation was found that indicates that the rising of Sothis initiates the Egyptian year. And it was the first possible coincidence with the actual rising of the Nile. There were other occurrences in the same number of days separation that did not coincide with the rising of the Nile, so I'm assuming that they may have been used or known of somehow to calculate the duration, but it wasn't until it migrated to the point where they could use it with the rising of the Nile and possibly to construct the Egyptian calendar. At any rate, the previous dates, 5690, 7148, and 8606, showed the same simultaneous rising of Venus and Sirius. Prior to 8606, it couldn't be done from Egypt because the star Sirius never rose above the horizon. The last date I have here is July 31st, 143 of the Common Era. This is calculated by adding the correct number of days to the previous event in 1316, and it produces July 31st, 143. And the reason I show this is this is within the range of Meyer's projected new Sothic cycle based on the reference that he found to 139. And I show here that Sirius is 14 days late. So the cycle no longer worked because of the proximity of Sirius, but it did work, in fact, for 1, 2, 3 cycles for sure. Beyond that, it's not known for sure. This is a representation of an object found in the tomb of the second pharaoh of the first dynasty, where the reference was also found to Sirius beginning the Egyptian calendar year. Sopdet was later equated with Isis, the main goddess of Egypt. And in the Egyptian records, Sopdet was understood to be the consort of the Egyptian god Sah, S-A-H, who was the personification of the constellation Orion. And the star Sirius is located just below the constellation Orion. And according to the record, Sopdet and Sah were the parents of the god Sopdu, who was the personification of the planet Venus. Sopdet, as I said, was conflated with Isis, and Sah later with Osiris, and their son Sopdu was conflated to Horus. Osiris was also associated with the planet Venus in that he was understood to be the god of resurrection. And in its cycle, Venus is obscured by the sun for 70 days and then reemerges as the morning star. And the 70 days, astronomically, is the origin of the 70-day period of mummification that was prevalent throughout Egypt. It's derived from the disappearance and then reemergence of the planet Venus, which was also seen as a resurrection. I now want to discuss the conclusions that I have drawn from this discovery, beginning with This astronomical cycle actually works with the tropical year and with the Egyptian calendar to the very day after 1458 years. While the heliacal rising with Sothis is not only impossible to observe, but does not work with the seasons. This discovery presents a strong argument for the low chronology for the ancient Near East. The high and middle chronologies for the A&E need to be abandoned. This discovery provides an astronomically confirmed verification of the chronologies of Dynasty 18 and 19. It provides an absolute verifiable date for each true Sothic cycle, based on the simultaneous rising of Venus and Sithis. The vagaries that plagued the now discredited heliacal rising of Sothis are eliminated. The ancients apparently had a high degree of accuracy in observing the movements of the heavenly bodies. They likely also had a high level of mathematical competency. If the Egyptians knew of the Venus-Sothic cycle during the first dynasty, then that Sothic cycle would have started, as we noted, 4232. In Egyptian mythology, Sopdet Isis and Sa Osiris are a couple, she representing Sirius and her consort, the planet Venus and Osiris. The beginning of their Sothic cycle was the simultaneous rising of Thoth. It is logical to me that the Egyptian calendar of 365 days was constructed because of a knowledge of this cycle. And I'll add this, the actual observed simultaneous rising of these days in the last day of the Egyptian cycle occurred after 3 years, not 4 years. And this is not a problem because that helps correct it with the actual tropical year. And the final point is just a comment. This is derived from my book, but before the book was published, I actually attempted to get this published in magazines of repute. I submitted it for peer review and was rejected because I am not considered to be a peer. So evidently, unless someone who is peer reviewable latches onto this and wants to get it known, it will remain in this realm. So I thank you for your attention, and I would appreciate any comments.